Betrayed by the one person I trusted most and framed for a crime I didn't commit, I uncovered shocking secrets, hidden affairs, and a web of lies that could have destroyed my life, but I fought back and reclaimed my truth. If you want to see how I turned the tables on a powerful boss and exposed the deception, watch till the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more suspenseful real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. I used to believe the law was simple. Truth wins, lies fall apart, and justice eventually finds its way through the cracks. That belief kept me alive for 16 years in the legal world. 16 years of long nights, lukewarm coffee, and the quiet satisfaction that comes when the right person finally gets what they deserve. Until the case that broke it all apart. My name is Madeline Reese, and I was a senior paralegal at Wright & Keaton, one of the most respected law firms in Dallas. We were representing a group of small investors in a class action suit against Elliot Grayson, a real estate tycoon accused of laundering millions through false property valuations. It was the kind of case that could make or break a career, and mine was about to break. The morning the trouble began, I was reviewing deposition notes in the office library when Daniel Wright, my boss and managing partner, called me into his office. "Close the door," he said, his voice tight. He was in his late 40s, sharp, charming, the kind of man who made people nervous without saying much. The blinds were half closed, his desk covered in stacks of documents, his tie loosened just enough to look like stress was catching up. He handed me a file. "We need to review everything related to Charlotte Avery, our key witness. She's not answering her phone." I froze. Charlotte Avery was everything our case depended on, a former accountant for Grayson's company, the one who'd agreed to testify that the numbers were falsified. If she didn't show up, our entire case would collapse. "She missed her prep session?" I asked. "She missed her flight," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "She was supposed to fly in from Atlanta last night. But she never boarded." I frowned. "She's not answering anyone?" "No. Not me, not her sister, not even the investigator we hired to escort her." Something in his voice bothered me. Not fear, not panic. It was too controlled. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Madeline, you've built most of this case. If anything happens, I need you to keep things contained. No one outside this room knows she's missing, understood?" I nodded, but my gut twisted. "You think she ran?" "I think people get scared when millions of dollars and threats are involved," he said. "We'll find her. Just keep the files locked and don't talk to anyone." That was the first time Daniel asked me to hide something. And it wouldn't be the last. By the end of the day, whispers had started. Associates were glancing at me in the hallways, phones buzzing quietly. Around 7 p.m., my inbox filled with messages from reporters asking for confirmation that a key witness in the Grayson case had vanished. My stomach dropped. It had leaked. I stormed back to Daniel's office, but his door was locked. His assistant said he'd left early. That was unusual. He never left before me. On my way out of the building, I caught my reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, messy bun, the outline of someone who'd been running on coffee and instinct for too long. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Ms. Reese?" A male voice said. "This is Detective Liam Carter with Dallas PD. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a woman named Charlotte Avery." My pulse spiked. What happened? "There's a record of a private flight from Dallas Executive Airport to Arizona under her name," he said. "And your name appears on the passenger list." "What? Did you travel with her, Ms. Reese?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I've never even been to that airport." There was silence on the line, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "Then we might have a problem," Liam said. "Because surveillance footage shows someone matching your description boarding that plane." I barely slept. The next morning, the firm was in chaos. Police had already been by to question Daniel. When I arrived, the receptionist wouldn't even meet my eyes. Daniel called me into his office again, but this time, his tone was different, colder. The firm's decided to put you on administrative leave, he said. Until this confusion is resolved. I stared at him. Administrative leave? Daniel, you know I didn't. It's not about guilt, he interrupted softly. It's about perception. Reporters are calling. Clients are nervous. I have to protect the firm. I took a step closer. You think I had something to do with Charlotte's disappearance? He sighed, leaning back. Madeline, I don't know what to think. But your name is on a flight manifest with her. That's not nothing. I swallowed hard. I've worked for you for 11 years. You know me better than anyone. You know I wouldn't. I'm sorry, he said. I really am. He wasn't sorry. He was scared. And in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't shocked by the accusation. He was expecting it. When I got home that evening, I found a manila envelope slipped under my apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a USB drive. Against every instinct, I plugged it into my laptop. A single video file. The footage was grainy, airport security, time-stamped from 2 nights ago. A woman with my build, my hairstyle, even my coat, walking beside Charlotte Avery toward a private jet. But it wasn't me. I leaned closer. The camera caught her face for 1 second, just long enough to see what she was holding. A security badge. From Wright and Keaton. My badge. I sat frozen for minutes, replaying the clip over and over. Someone had cloned my identity, or stolen it, and the only person who could have had access to my work badge, my files, my travelogue, was Daniel. My phone rang again, the same unknown number. Ms. Reese, Liam's calm voice said, I've reviewed the footage. I believe you. I exhaled shakily. You do. I've seen doctored surveillance before, he said. But whoever did this knew what they were doing. This isn't random. What do I do now? I asked. His voice lowered. You find out who Charlotte was really running from. I've spent years helping attorneys build airtight cases. Evidence, timelines, motive, every detail mattered. But when your own name lands on an arrest report, all that logic disappears. Suddenly, you're not the one connecting the dots. You are the dot. After Detective Liam Carter's call, I didn't leave my apartment for a full day. I replayed that surveillance footage so many times I could almost smell the jet fuel in my living room. The woman in the video moved like me, same stride, same nervous glance over her shoulder. But her eyes weren't mine. Liam had told me not to go public. The more noise you make, the harder it is to separate the truth, he said. Still, silence was suffocating me. So I did what any paralegal would do. I started digging. Charlotte Avery's personnel file was confidential, but I'd helped compile evidence for her deposition. I knew she'd lived in a modest condo in Frisco before moving to Atlanta. Her emergency contact was a younger sister, Melanie Avery, listed as a nurse at a Dallas hospital. That was my first lead. The next afternoon, I drove to Baylor University Medical Center under a fake patient pretext, a trick I'd picked up from years of background research. I found Melanie in the staff lounge, sipping from a paper cup, scrolling through her phone. She looked nothing like her sister, brunette, soft-spoken, early 30s. Melanie, I asked carefully. She looked up, wary. Yes. My name's Madeline Reese. I worked with Charlotte on the Grayson case. Her face fell. Oh, you're her. The way she said it made my stomach twist.
I'm sorry.
I asked. Melanie stood, crossing her arms. The police already came by.
They said you were the last person seen with her.
I wasn't, I said firmly. Someone made it look that way. Melanie hesitated, studying me. Charlotte said you were smart, careful. She trusted you. She told you that? She nodded. Weeks before she left Atlanta, she called me crying. Said she'd gotten threats. I told her to go to the police, but she said someone inside your firm told her not to. My pulse quickened. Someone inside the firm? Melanie lowered her voice. She wouldn't say who, but she said, "He's helping me disappear for my safety." I froze. He.
She never said a name.
But I didn't need her to. There was only one Charlotte had direct contact with. My boss, Daniel Wright. That evening, I called Liam. He answered on the first ring.
You shouldn't be out there chasing this alone, Madeline.
I found Charlotte's sister, I said. Charlotte told her someone inside our firm helped her vanish. He was quiet for a long moment. That fits what I found. The flight she supposedly took? The private jet was chartered under an LLC connected to one of Daniel Wright's shell companies. I stopped breathing.
You're sure?
Positive. The account trail ends at a trust Daniel manages. I sank onto the couch, gripping the phone tighter. So he helped her disappear. Why? To protect her? To protect himself. Liam's voice softened. You really trusted him, didn't you? I laughed bitterly. I worked for him for over a decade.
He called me his right hand.
Guess he forgot the part about cutting it off when things got messy. He hesitated, then said, Madeline, I can meet you tomorrow. But not at your apartment.
If he's covering something, your place could already be watched.
His concern caught me off guard. It wasn't just professional. It was personal, quiet, careful.
Where?
I asked. Old Mill Cafe, noon. It's out of the way. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what I was more nervous about, the meeting or the fact that I was starting to trust a man whose job was to suspect me. The next morning, I drove to the cafe. It was tucked behind an auto shop, the kind of place where locals nursed black coffee and gossip. Liam was already there, navy jacket, rolled sleeves, badge clipped inside his coat. He looked less like a detective and more like a man carrying secrets he couldn't tell anyone. When he saw me, he stood, pulling out a chair. Thanks for coming. Thanks for believing me, I replied. He smiled faintly. Not every day someone hands me a case that's cleaner than my own files. We went over the evidence, the fake manifest, the security footage, the shell company. Liam showed me a photo on his phone, a still from airport footage that I hadn't seen. It captured a man in the background, face obscured by a cap, walking just behind Charlotte and the woman impersonating me. But the cufflinks caught my eye. Silver, engraved with the letter W. Daniel Wright's initials. My breath hitched. That's him. Liam nodded slowly. We traced that flight to a small airstrip in Tucson. Charlotte Avery's passport was scanned there, but no footage of her arrival.
It's like she disappeared into thin air.
I leaned back, whispering, or someone made sure she never landed. He watched me carefully. You really think he killed her? I swallowed. I think he needed her gone before she could testify, and I think he's using me to make it look like I helped. He leaned forward. Then you need to be smarter than him. His tone changed, steady, protective. It did something to me I didn't expect. It made me feel seen, after weeks of being treated like a suspect. I looked away, composing myself. Smarter than a man who builds his lies on legal documents? I've been his paralegal for years, Liam. I practically built his fortress for him. Then you'll know where it cracks, he said. That night, back in my apartment, I started reviewing every document Daniel had ever made me notarize. Financial disclosures, client trust accounts, invoices for the Grayson case. I stayed up until dawn, eyes burning, tracing the shell companies Liam mentioned. That's when I saw it, an internal memo Daniel had sent 2 months earlier, authorizing a $500,000 confidential security payment related to witness relocation. The recipient, Avery Solutions, LLC. My hands trembled. Avery Solutions. Charlotte's last name. Was that her own company, or one Daniel created using her name? Either way, that payment came from our firm's client trust fund, which meant Daniel had committed fraud, using client money to hide a witness. It was enough to bury him. I sent the file to Liam, encrypted, and typed one line of text. He paid her off, or paid her silence. Minutes later, my phone rang. Liam's voice was low and urgent. Madeline, listen carefully. Don't stay there tonight. What? I just got word Daniel filed an internal complaint saying you stole firm funds. He's building a case to get you arrested. I felt my chest tighten. He's moving fast. Too fast, Liam said. He knows we're onto him. And then, the lights in my apartment flickered. For a split second, the reflection on my window showed a man standing in the hallway outside, still, silent, watching. But when I turned, he was gone. That was the night I stopped being the accused. That was the night I decided to become the hunter. I've always believed fear has a sound. It's not the scream or the siren, it's the moment before them. The silence that hums right under your skin. That night, standing by my window, staring at the reflection of a man who vanished as soon as I turned, that silence screamed. I packed a small bag, my laptop, and the few case files I'd printed, then left the apartment through the back stairwell. Liam was right. Daniel was building something, and I didn't want to be standing in the middle when it collapsed. I drove across town to an old extended-stay motel near Love Field Airport. The kind of place where no one asks questions as long as you pay cash. I stayed up the rest of the night scrolling through encrypted messages Liam had sent me, scanned copies of transaction logs, subpoena requests, and a list of names. All of them tied to Daniel Wright. The last name on the list stopped me cold. C. Avery, witness relocation compensation. It wasn't just a payoff. There were recurring monthly deposits from one of Daniel's offshore accounts. If Charlotte Avery was dead, why was she still getting paid? By sunrise, I'd made a decision. I wasn't running anymore. I was going to find Charlotte myself. I called Liam as soon as the sun hit the blinds. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. "Somewhere safe. Listen, I found proof Daniel's been paying Charlotte regularly. Not a one-time payout. Ongoing transfers." He exhaled slowly. "So she's alive. Or someone's pretending to be her." A pause. Then his tone hardened. "Send me the details. I'll trace where those deposits land." When I emailed him the data, he replied minutes later. The funds end up in an account registered to a small property management firm in Tucson. My heart pounded. That's where her flight supposedly landed. "Exactly," Liam said. "Madeline, don't go there alone." I wasn't planning to. I hesitated, then added, "But I also can't keep sitting here waiting for him to destroy me." He didn't argue. Instead, he said softly, "You've got more backbone than half the lawyers I know." Something about his tone, low, honest, made me forget for a second that he was a detective and I was still technically a suspect. "Flattery won't get you promoted," I said, forcing a small smile. "Who said I wanted a promotion?" he replied. 2 days later, Liam arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a small diner off Highway 67. He brought printed documents and an evidence envelope sealed with police tape. As soon as I sat down, he slid a photo across the table. It was grainy, surveillance style, but unmistakable. Charlotte Avery. She was standing outside a real estate office in Tucson, sunglasses on, alive. My chest tightened. "She's okay." Liam nodded. "At least, physically. But she's not hiding from danger. She's living under a new name. Charlotte Ellis. So she faked her disappearance. With help," he said quietly. "Her business license was signed off by someone using the initials DW. Daniel Wright." The realization hit me like a punch. He didn't just help her disappear, he rebuilt her life. Liam looked at me steadily. "We think he and Charlotte had a personal relationship. There are late-night wire transfers, encrypted emails, burner phone activity." I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of betrayal wash over me. He was sleeping with her. Maybe. Or maybe she was using him. Either way, they both had motive to stage this. When I opened my eyes again, Liam was watching me carefully. "Madeline, you look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't had the luxury," I said dryly. He smiled faintly. "You're still sharp. That's good. We'll need that." Something in his words, "we'll," gave me strength. That evening, I returned to my motel, but the door was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, heart pounding, and called Liam immediately. He arrived 10 minutes later with 2 uniformed officers. Inside, the room was trashed. My laptop was gone. The flash drive with the airport footage, gone too. But the files I'd hidden under the mattress were untouched. "They knew exactly what they came for," Liam said, scanning the room. "This wasn't random." "Daniel sent someone," I whispered. Liam nodded. "He's trying to erase your proof. But he's sloppy. The motel camera caught his guy on video." "Who?" Liam held up his phone, showing me a paused frame from the lobby security feed. The man's face was clear. Aidan Blake, one of the firm's private investigators, the same one Daniel had assigned to protect Charlotte months ago. I clenched my fists. He's working both sides. Liam studied me for a moment, then said, "Madeline, this goes beyond Daniel. He's got reach, money, connections, people who clean up his messes. If we're going to bring him down, we'll need solid proof of intent." I nodded. "Then we find the missing link, the reason Charlotte agreed to vanish." The next morning, I traced a series of public records in Tucson tied to Charlotte's alias. Among them was a real estate transaction, a property recently purchased by her new company. The buyer listed Grayson Development Holdings, the same company at the center of our lawsuit. It hit me like ice water. "She wasn't his enemy," I whispered. "She was part of his cover-up." Liam leaned over my screen. "You're saying Charlotte was helping Grayson hide assets while pretending to testify against him?" I nodded. "And Daniel orchestrated it. He made her look like a whistleblower so our case would collapse publicly, while secretly helping her launder his client's money." Liam exhaled. "That's a career-ending move. And if he's desperate enough to protect it, he'll destroy anyone in his way, including you." I met his eyes. "Then we hit him where it hurts, proof of collusion." He smirked faintly. "Now you're talking like a prosecutor." Just a paralegal who's tired of being the disposable one. He studied me a moment longer than necessary. Madeline, when this is over, promise me something. What? Don't go back to working for men like him. I gave him a tired smile. Maybe I'll just start my own firm. Reese and no nonsense. He chuckled, the sounds soft and grounding in the storm around us. Later that night, while reviewing files Liam had pulled from an old police database, I found something buried deep. A scanned ID of Daniel under an alias, used to register the Tucson property. The signature wasn't perfect, but I'd seen that slanted W in too many legal documents not to recognize it. I sent Liam the proof, along with a message. This is enough to open an indictment. He replied almost instantly. Stay put. I'll come get you. But before he could, the motel phone rang. I answered cautiously. A woman's voice whispered, trembling, Madeline. My heart nearly stopped. Charlotte. Yes. Please, stop digging. You don't understand what he's capable of. Then help me understand, I said, gripping the phone. There was a pause, and then, he told me if I didn't disappear, he'd destroy my sister's life. He owns everything. The firm. The cops. The case. Charlotte, where are you? But the line went dead. And outside, headlights swept across my window, stopping right at my door. When I reached the firm's parking garage that night, it was already dark, the kind of dark that makes even familiar places feel hostile. My heels echoed sharply against the concrete as I approached my car. Every sound, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the drip of water from a pipe, felt amplified, deliberate, like someone wanted me to hear it. I unlocked my car and froze. On the driver's seat lay an envelope. My name, Catherine Moore, written in bold, sharp letters. I glanced around, but the garage was empty. My heartbeat quickened as I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. It was the missing witness, Julia Parker, standing in front of a motel off Interstate 30. Alive. Smiling. Holding a newspaper dated 2 days ago. There was no note, no sender, no context. Just proof that everything I'd been saying might be true, and that someone knew where she was. My first instinct was to drive straight to the police, but something stopped me. The motel name, Lone Elm Inn. It wasn't far. And if I told the police now, the picture could disappear into evidence before I even saw her. So I drove. The motel looked like something from a forgotten decade. Neon flickering, paint peeling, the smell of mildew hanging in the air. I parked under a broken light and walked toward the front desk, trying to steady my voice. Hi, I'm looking for a friend. Julia Parker. She might have checked in a few days ago. The clerk didn't even look up from his crossword. We don't give out guest information. I slid a $50 bill across the counter. Not even if I'm worried about her safety? He sighed, glancing around before taking the cash. Room 14. End of the hall. My heart pounded as I made my way down the corridor. The door to room 14 was cracked open. A faint light flickered inside. I pushed it gently and froze. Julia was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone, perfectly calm. When she saw me, her expression didn't show surprise, only calculation. Catherine, she said softly, almost like she'd been expecting me. You shouldn't be here. Where have you been? My voice trembled. You disappeared days before testifying. They said you were scared for your life. And now I'm being framed for helping you run. Julia stood, her eyes cool and detached. It wasn't personal. You were convenient. Convenient. She sighed, walking closer. Someone needed a distraction. Someone with access to case files, travel logs, client information, all of which you had. You were loyal, dependable, and naive. The words stung. Who's behind this? Was it David? Julia smiled faintly, tilting her head. You really think your boss would risk his entire career over you? That smile, the knowing, rehearsed smile, made something click. This wasn't just about silencing a witness. It was about control, about hiding an affair. You're sleeping with him, I whispered. Her expression didn't change, but her silence confirmed everything. I stepped back, my pulse surging. You faked your disappearance. The flights. The evidence. You and David are framing me to protect your relationship. Julia crossed her arms. It's not just about that. You stumbled into something bigger. Money laundering, offshore accounts, fake shell clients. David couldn't risk you finding out. So he needed you gone. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but fear kept me still. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because, she said, walking to the door, you won't be able to prove it. By tomorrow, every file that ties him to me will be wiped. The only thing the police will have is your name. And then she left. I stood in that motel room for what felt like hours, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. The woman I'd spent weeks protecting was part of the very crime I'd tried to expose. My boss, the man who'd mentored me, had weaponized my loyalty. But beneath the fear, something else began to rise, resolve. If they wanted to frame me, they'd have to play my game now. I pulled out my phone and dialed Detective Owens. My voice was steady this time. Detective, it's Catherine. I found Julia Parker. By the time Detective Owens arrived at the motel, dawn had started to gray the Dallas skyline. The neon sign outside room 14 buzzed weakly, flickering between light and shadow. I stood by my car, clutching the photograph that had led me here. He approached quietly, his coat collar turned up against the morning chill. His expression was cautious, like he wasn't sure whether to trust me yet.
Catherine, he said, his voice steady. You said you found the witness.
I nodded, handing him the photo. She was here, alive. I spoke to her. She admitted everything, that she and David faked her disappearance to protect their affair. They framed me to cover up their financial crimes. He examined the photo carefully, then looked up. Is she still inside? I shook my head. She left 20 minutes before you got here. Owen sighed, rubbing his temple. We'll pull the motel's security footage, see if she's still nearby. His tone was measured, but I caught something beneath it, that quiet, skeptical note that said I've heard this before. You don't believe me, I said. It's not about belief, he replied, glancing at me. It's about proof. Right now, the only evidence we have is this photo, and your word. My word used to mean something, I whispered, bitterness creeping into my throat.
Before my boss decided to destroy it.
He studied me for a long moment. You're angry, rightfully so. But if you want to clear your name, you need to be smarter than they are. He took a slow step closer. Let's start with what you know. You said there were offshore accounts. Yes. Julia mentioned something about shell clients, fake corporations tied to David's real estate projects. I saw some strange payments a few weeks ago, but didn't think much of it at the time. Do you still have access to those files? I hesitated. Not legally. They revoked my credentials the day they fired me.
Then we'll need another way in, he said quietly.
Something they won't see coming. That afternoon, I went home and pulled out my old work laptop, the one I'd forgotten to return in the chaos of my firing. It was disconnected from the firm's system, but a few folders had been stored offline. I scrolled through them, my heart racing. Invoices, client lists, transaction reports, and then something odd. A folder labeled trial_witness_preparation, but inside were files with encrypted extensions, names like client A_001, Parker_ledger, and Catherine_override. I clicked on the last one. It asked for a password. My hands trembled as I typed David Weston, his full name. No luck. Then his wife's. Nothing. Finally, I tried Parker. The file opened. My stomach dropped. Inside were doctored documents, forged emails, fake travel records, even an audio clip that sounded like me arranging Julia's escape. My voice. My tone. My exact phrasing from real meetings, cut, stitched, and twisted into something sinister. It was a digital death sentence. I called Owens immediately. They built the frame before I even knew it was happening. They used my recorded calls, edited them. He exhaled slowly. That's how they covered their tracks. They probably planned this for months. I can send you the files. No, he interrupted sharply. Not over the phone. Meet me in person, tonight. Somewhere public but quiet. We met at a 24-hour diner off Elm Street, the kind of place where truckers came for black coffee and pie at midnight. I slid into the booth across from him, placing the USB drive between us. Owens didn't touch it right away. You realize this makes you a bigger target, he said softly. If they know you have proof. I've already been their target, I said. Now it's my turn. He finally picked up the drive and pocketed it. I'll run this through our forensics team, but if these files are as bad as you say, they'll come after you hard. You'll need to disappear for a while. I looked up at him. Disappear? That's what they did to Julia, and it worked. I won't hide. Something flickered in his eyes. Admiration, maybe, or concern. You're not afraid of much, are you? I used to be, I said quietly. Now I'm just tired of being lied to. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the diner filling the space between us. Finally, he said, I'll keep you updated. But until then, stay alert. Don't talk to anyone from the firm. Not even friends. You don't know who's involved. As he left, he rested a hand on my shoulder briefly, grounding, steady. You're not alone in this, Catherine. Not anymore. That night, I couldn't rest. Not out of fear, but calculation. I began writing everything down. Dates, names, meetings, suspicions. Every strange email. Every odd glance Julia had given me in the weeks before she vanished. I wanted a map of their lies, something that would make sense when the walls began to close in. And then I remembered something. During one of our late-night prep sessions for the trial, Julia had borrowed David's keycard to print something private. She'd kept it for almost an hour. If she'd used that access to plant the evidence against me, there might be a digital fingerprint, a log entry showing her ID on the system that night. If I could prove that, I could turn everything around. I emailed Owens a single line. I think I found a trail. Meet me tomorrow morning at the office. When I pulled into the firm's parking lot the next day, the air was unnaturally still. A security guard stood near the front door, arms folded. As I stepped out of my car, he eyed me warily. Ms. Moore, you're not authorized. Detective Owens is inside, I said quickly. He's expecting me. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the lobby was eerily quiet. The hum of computers, the click of heels, all gone. And then I saw them, 2 detectives near David's office. Owens was one of them. When he looked up and saw me, his expression wasn't the calm, reassuring one I'd seen last night. It was something else. Regret.
Catherine, he said softly.
We need to talk. The fluorescent lights in the firm's lobby buzzed overhead, cold and relentless, casting every polished surface in pale reflection. I froze at the sight of Detective Owens standing beside 2 uniformed officers near David's glass-walled office. His expression was heavy, not sharp, not detached, but weighted with something close to guilt. My throat went dry. What's going on? He hesitated before speaking. Catherine Moore, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and aiding the disappearance of a federal witness. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. What? My voice cracked. Owens, you know that's not true. I found her. I called you. He stepped closer, his jaw tight. You need to come with us quietly. I backed away, shaking my head. You saw the files. You told me yourself. The files are missing, he interrupted, his tone low. The motel footage? Gone. Security system wiped clean. And the USB you gave me? He paused. It was empty, Catherine. Completely blank. I stared at him, the world blurring around the edges. That's not possible. I checked it. Owens looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but something in his eyes said he couldn't. The officers approached slowly. This is insane, I whispered. They're playing us both. Catherine. Don't. My voice rose, trembling with fury. You told me to trust you.
You said I wasn't alone. For a second, his expression cracked, just enough for me to see the man behind the badge. I still believe you, he said quietly. But right now I can't prove it. Let me handle this. The cold metal of the cuffs closed around my wrists. Every sound, the click of the lock, the shuffle of papers, the low murmur of voices, etched itself into my memory. As they led me out of the building, I caught sight of David standing by the elevator, pretending to be shocked. His perfectly rehearsed concern made bile rise in my throat. David! I shouted, twisting against the officer's grip. You did this. You and Julia.
His expression didn't change. Catherine, please, he said softly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. That tone, gentle, patronizing, was the same one he used when assigning me impossible deadlines. It was the sound of control. I wanted to lunge at him, to scream, to make him admit what he'd done. But instead, I held his gaze and said, You're going to regret underestimating me. At the precinct, the interrogation room was smaller than I expected, sterile and quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Owen sat across from me, his sleeves rolled up, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I can't keep you here long, he said, sliding a folder toward me. They're building a case, and it's solid. Bank transfers, call logs, even fingerprints on the motel door. It all points to you. I stared at the folder, numb. They planted it. You said it yourself. They're erasing everything. I know, he said softly. But until I can prove it, my hands are tied. Then why am I even here? Because, he said, leaning closer, if they think you're broken, they'll get sloppy. I need them to believe they've won. I blinked. You want me to play along? He nodded slightly. Just long enough for me to trace where those forged documents came from. There's a digital signature, one I recognized from a previous case. Someone used high-level software to mimic your voice, Catherine. Deep fake technology. That word chilled me. So they didn't just forge my emails, They fabricated me. Owens nodded. And whoever did it has access to government-grade encryption. I exhaled shakily. That means it's not just David and Julia.
Exactly.
There was a knock at the door. A female officer entered and whispered something to Owens. His face darkened. They're transferring you to county holding until arraignment, he said quietly.
How long?
48 hours, maybe less.
But I'll get you out.
He lowered his voice, leaning in close. I'll send someone I trust.
Don't say a word to anyone else.
He slipped a small card under my cuffed hands. On it, a handwritten name and number, E. Garza, forensic analyst. Call her if you get access to a phone, he murmured.
She owes me a favor.
Then he stood and left before I could respond. The cell was cold and gray, the metallic scent of disinfectant mixing with the low murmur of other detainees. I sat on the narrow bench, knees drawn up, replaying every conversation I'd had with Julia, every slip, every smirk. She'd said something that night at the motel. By tomorrow, every file that ties him to me will be wiped. That meant they had someone inside the system, maybe an IT director, or worse, a law enforcement contact. And if Owen's USB had been wiped after I gave it to him, that meant the mole was close. Too close. I reached for the tiny card in my pocket and memorized the number before the guard could notice. When the shift changed and the new guard wasn't paying attention, I approached the phone. My hands were still trembling as I dialed. Garza, a calm voice answered. This is Catherine Moore, I whispered. Detective Owens said you could help me. There was silence. Then, I thought this call might come. What do you need? I need to prove my boss and a witness framed me. They're using AI-generated files, deepfakes, altered documents. She paused. That's bigger than your firm, Catherine. If what you're saying is true, they're connected to a data laundering network I've been tracing for months. Data laundering. That was new. I can get you proof, I said. But I need a way out first.
She hesitated, then said, Leave that to me.
Someone will be waiting when they transfer you tomorrow. The line went dead. I hung up the phone, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift, a quiet certainty that I was no longer the hunted one. This time, I'd be the one setting the trap. The van's engine rumbled as we pulled away from the precinct. My wrists were cuffed to a steel bar bolted to the floor, and the air inside smelled like metal and rain. Outside, the Dallas sky was the color of wet concrete. The officer driving said nothing, his eyes fixed on the road. The other one, a woman with short hair and tired eyes, sat across from me, reading from a clipboard. Catherine Moore, she said finally. 36. Paralegal. Charged with obstruction, tampering, and accessory to a federal witness disappearance.
Quite the resume.
Her tone was neutral, but something about the way she said it, controlled, rehearsed, felt wrong. I studied her face. How long have you been working transfers?
Long enough, she said without looking up.
When we hit a stoplight, she reached for her radio, but instead of a call sign, she said quietly, You're not going to county. My pulse jumped.
What?
She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Name's Elena Garza.
Owens told me to find you.
I stared, disbelief giving way to a rush of relief.
You're the analyst.
She nodded once. We don't have much time. The evidence against you is being wiped right now, including the backup drives at your firm. Someone's feeding fake confirmations to law enforcement databases. If we don't act fast, your entire case becomes permanent fiction. I looked toward the driver.
He's with you.
Garza smirked. He's deaf and follows orders. I like him that way. 20 minutes later, we turned off the highway and into an abandoned industrial lot. Rusted signs, broken windows, and silence. The van rolled to a stop beside a warehouse that looked condemned. Garza unlocked my cuffs. Stay close. Inside, the building had been converted into a makeshift tech lab, servers stacked on folding tables, screens displaying lines of encrypted code, satellite feeds flickering. "This is my field base," she said, motioning me to a chair. "Owens wanted to handle this officially, but after your arrest, we couldn't risk internal channels. Someone in his department is feeding information to Weston's lawyers." I swallowed hard. So it's true. They have a mole. Two, actually. And one of them has high-level access to state servers. She sat beside me, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I've been tracking Weston's shell accounts for 6 months. Offshore routing, false donor foundations, campaign contributions, all of it tied to digital forgeries. But here's the catch. Those documents were never meant to frame you. That came later." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked up. "Someone hijacked their system. The moment you found out about the laundering, Weston's team shifted blame to you, using your biometric voice data from the firm's call recordings. So they took my real words and twisted them." I murmured. "Exactly." Garza tapped a key, and my own voice echoed from the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. "Yes, Julia, I'll arrange your flight for tonight. Make sure no one sees you." I flinched. "That's not what I said." Garza smiled faintly. "I know. That's why we're going to turn it against them." 4 hours, we worked. She traced server routes through Panama, Iceland, and eventually, Dallas. The final node led back to a private server registered under Weston Holdings' IT security division. My boss had been laundering data through his own firm's infrastructure. "That's how they cleaned the money," Garza explained. "By using employee credentials as rotating digital proxies." "You were just the latest." "Can we prove it?" Garza cracked her knuckles. "Already have. But to make it admissible, we need to retrieve the physical access log, the backup keycard registry from the night Julia disappeared." A familiar chill ran down my spine. "That's in the firm's secure archive room." She nodded. "Then we go get it." We returned to the building after midnight. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with hidden motion. Garza picked the back lock like she'd done it 1,000 times. The archive room was 3 floors down, secured by biometric entry. The scanner glowed red. "Hold this," she whispered, handing me a small device that looked like a credit card reader. "This will clone the ID once the scanner pings." "But whose ID?" She placed her palm on the reader. The light turned green. I blinked. "You had access?" She smirked. "I used to work here. Before I found out Weston's people were laundering data through law enforcement contracts." Inside the room, the air was cold and humming with machines. Garza moved to a control panel, pulling out a flash drive. "We'll only have 30 seconds before the backup alarm triggers." "Go," I said. She plugged it in. Data scrolled across the screens like a storm. I watched as file after file streamed into her device. Then, a noise. Footsteps. Garza froze. I turned toward the door, heart racing. A shadow moved outside the frosted glass. Then the door swung open. David Weston. He stepped in calmly, his suit pressed, his voice steady. "I wondered how long it would take you to crawl back here, Catherine." Garza's hand hovered near her holster. "Don't move." David's smile was cruel. "You won't shoot me."
You need me alive to make this little story of yours sound credible.
He looked at me.
You could have had everything, Catherine.
The promotion, the recognition.
But you had to dig where you weren't invited.
Because you were stealing millions from the people who trusted you, I spat. He shrugged. And yet, who's sitting in a cell for it?
Not me.
I stepped forward, holding my ground. That's about to change. Garza yanked the flash drive from the terminal.
Got it.
David lunged, grabbing my arm, but I twisted, slamming my elbow into his ribs. Garza raised her gun, voice sharp. Don't test me. He straightened, breathing hard, eyes burning. You think anyone will believe two disgraced women over a man with half the state in his pocket? Garza smiled thinly. They won't have to. The data we just pulled includes your private ledger and encrypted communications with Julia Parker. It's over. David's smirk faltered for the first time. Then suddenly, alarms blared, flashing red lights filling the room. They know we're here, Garza hissed. I grabbed the flash drive and bolted for the back exit, Garza covering me as shouts echoed down the hall. We burst into the night air just as sirens filled the distance. Garza tossed me the keys to the van. Go. Owens is waiting at the old train depot downtown. He'll upload everything to federal servers. What about you? I'll hold them off. Go. I drove like a woman possessed, lights streaking past, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. When I reached the depot, Owens was already there, laptop open, satellite modem humming. He looked up as I ran toward him, breathless. You got it. I handed him the flash drive. All of it. Ledgers, transactions, Julia's connection. Everything. He plugged it in, his eyes scanning the data. Then his expression hardened. This is more than we thought. Weston wasn't just laundering money, he was trading legal data for real estate licenses, selling information to developers to manipulate housing laws. So he used me as a shield, I said bitterly, to keep the chain of evidence clean. Owens looked at me, his tone firm. You just took down half of his empire, Catherine. In the distance, the sirens faded. The city lights flickered, then steadied. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Freedom. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Because Julia Parker was still out there. And she wasn't the type to run. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, the AC hummed faintly, but emotionally. Every bench, every polished wood surface, seemed designed to echo secrets. Reporters whispered in the back, their cameras trained on the empty witness box that had once belonged to Julia Parker. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I wasn't the frightened paralegal anymore. I was Catherine Moore, experienced, steady, and armed with truth. Detective Owens stood behind me, quietly supportive. Garza had left earlier, ensuring all the evidence was safely transmitted to federal authorities. And there, in the defendant's chair, sat David Weston. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind of mask he wore to fool the world. But I could see it, the tension in his shoulders, the flicker in his eyes. Across the room, Julia Parker, or rather, Julia Ellis, as she legally was now, sat poised, almost serene. Her eyes met mine briefly. No apologies. No smiles. Only calculation. The judge called the courtroom to order. I walked to the podium, papers in hand, voice steady. Your Honor, members of the court, I am here to present the truth. Not the story they created, but the reality of what happened. I laid out everything. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the manipulated flight logs, the deepfake recordings, every document Owens and Garza had verified, every detail that had been twisted to frame me. And then I faced Julia. You worked with him to disappear, I said. To manipulate evidence, to protect an affair while framing me. You endangered lives, and you hid behind false narratives. Why? Her gaze was cold, precise. Because I had no choice, she said. I protected myself. And you were never supposed to find out. I shook my head, the betrayal cutting deeper than any criminal act. You were supposed to be the truth in this case. Instead, you became part of the lie. The courtroom was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. David shifted, uncomfortable now that the web of his crimes was unraveling. His defense faltered as Owens presented the digital proof, the emails, the transactions, and the manipulated recordings. Hours passed. Every witness, every forensic expert, every shred of evidence methodically dismantled his empire. By the time the judge read the verdict, the weight that had been crushing me for months lifted slightly. Guilty. On all counts. David's lips pressed into a thin line. Julia's eyes betrayed the first hint of fear. And me, I finally exhaled. Later, outside the courthouse, I felt the Dallas sun warm my face. Owens was beside me, watching quietly. You did it, he said simply. I did what I had to, I replied. For myself. And for everyone who trusted me. He smiled faintly. You were stronger than I ever imagined. I felt the words deep in my chest, not because of him, but because I had reclaimed myself. My life. My voice. Justice isn't always about the law, I said softly. Sometimes it's about standing tall when the world tries to crush you. Owens nodded. And sometimes, the people who betray you the most are the ones you trust the most. But you survived. I looked out over the city, the skyline of Dallas shimmering in the late afternoon light. It had been a long road, betrayal, crime, lies, and manipulation. But now I had my truth. I walked away from the courthouse, shoulders squared, heart steady. No longer the hunted, no longer the pawn. I was free. No matter how deep the betrayal or how powerful those who try to destroy you, the truth has a way of coming to light. I learned that strength isn't just surviving, it's standing tall, reclaiming your voice, and refusing to let anyone define your story. Always trust your instincts, fight for justice, and remember, courage can turn even the darkest moments into your greatest victories.
If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen play out?